On today's episode of A Niche Thing, we are discussing craft beers and India Pale Ale. This is my story of the craft beer evolution in the country. And let me start with a little flashback. Just go back 5-7 years, think of the beer choices at a pub or a wine shop, and I'm pretty sure only 3-4 mass beer brands would come to mind. Cut to now, the choices are so many. In fact, in a city like Bombay, you can literally struggle to even figure out which beer you want to buy because there must be at least 80 to 100 craft beer options available. So, to discuss all of this in the studio, I have two very close friends of mine who've played a big role in the craft beer industry. So, starting with Navin.
Hello.
Navin co-founded Gateway Brewing Company, which was the first brewery in Maharashtra to keg beers rather than opening tap rooms and supplying craft beers to other pubs and restaurants. And then I've got Pankil, who's a partner at Woodside.
What's up, guys?
Which has pretty much been like a beacon of craft beers in Bombay. And also the first pub to actually serve Gateway beers.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think all of us really go back a while into this space. And we will get talking more about craft beers after these short messages.
Hello. It's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. Do you know that every time you recall a memory, you tweak it a little bit? Listen to Ashton talk to Dr. Nicole Byers, neuropsychologist and CEO of Rocky Mountain Neurosciences in Calgary, while they discuss this fascinating topic. On Cock and Bull, Cyrus, Punit, Nivedita, and myself can't stop gushing over the inauguration of India's first double-decker electric bus. I don't think there was that much gushing, but go ahead and listen to it. It was fun anyway. On Advertising is Dead is All Business, Varun talks to Bliss Club founder Minu Margaret about her journey of building a community-centric brand. On A Niche Thing, Anish talks to Sonika Bhasin, a sustainability enthusiast. The duo discuss waste management and effective ways of recycling, and duo they really are. Sonika is Anish's sister. And on A Sip of Finance, Priyanka explains 3 things one should consider before getting health insurance. Hey everybody, as you know, we've been beating the horse for merchandise, and you should go and get it now before we refresh our collections. And what's there right now won't be available forever. So go get it now. You can go to ivmpodcast.com, go click on the store link, and you'll be able to find the store, or go to beyondfollow.com/IVM, and you can go directly over there and pick up the merchandise. Also, remember, if you're following this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Social media helps, but not as much of word of mouth. But if you're a social media fellow, then go to our IVM podcast handle on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn and follow us there. Also, please do remember to check out all of our different YouTube channels. We have a ton of them now. You can go to ivmpodcast.com/YouTube, where we maintain a list of all of these channels. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors for this week: TransUnion Civil, Boat Lifestyle, Checkpoint Software, Small Case, and Intel vPro. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Guys, before we really deep dive into what craft beers are, tell me a little story about how both of you, how did Gateway and Woodside meet, and how long back was that?
This was a while ago. I think, I'll just, at that point, Woodside Inn was, we were already into beers. We were serving beers. We were, trying to get more beers and people to drink more beers. Because when we started, we had 4 beers on our menu. We had Kingfisher, Corona, Heineken, and San Miguel. The idea of craft beers didn't exist in 2007, including us. We didn't know what that they were. And then I think a few years later, we started hearing about craft beers. We knew in the US it was a movement, and we heard of these guys coming together and starting a craft brewery.
This was, I think, in 2013.
2013, yeah. I think this is before, when you guys were just, I think you were working on your licenses and pushing for that.
I think the homebrewing also
Homebrewing,
was
correct.
Homebrewing in Bombay was a pretty big underground scenario. I think, of course, Naveen has homebrewed a lot. I've joined Pankil at a couple of homebrewing sessions, which did not go down really well.
Of course, we did not make alcohol. Yeah.
So I think it came about somewhere around 2010 when Rahul got in touch with me. I used to maintain a blog while I used to brew at home. And I couldn't find anybody else in India brewing. So, I don't know, Rahul stumbled upon the blog and he got in touch with me and he said, hey, I would love to learn how to make beer. And then we kind of connected and he said, listen, why don't we start thinking about this as a business? And I said, absolutely, this is what I want to do. So got, brewing together. looked at, the policies in the state, and they were non-existent. And, started brewing, started teaching him, went to the excise department, tried to understand how we can influence or change the policy. I think that was the time when we met, or Rahul got too enthusiastic with some of the brews and went to Woodside and said, hey, why don't you try this? And then I remember going to, a few of the places, carrying an ice box and getting people to try the beers. So they were experimental, but I'd been brewing since 2006. So by 2010, 2011, I had kind of honed in the craft. And, that's how things started.
Yeah.
Just for context, Rahul is my co-founder at Swami. So yeah, I think we've had very similar conversations with Rahul at some point in our lives.
At Gateway as well.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just really, it's always fun to hear these kind of stories, because back in the day there was no semblance of craft. I remember it was my 30th birthday. Gateway had not started yet, and Rahul had come over with a keg of beer, and we had that hand pump system to pump the beers out, and everyone at that house party was flipping, saying, "What? how are you getting beers in kegs?" Cut to that now, of course, there are so many options. There's been a lot of change in policy. So today in Maharashtra, you can actually get craft beers delivered to your house,
Absolutely.
which blows my mind. And I don't think we would have really imagined 5 years back this would ever happen, right? Wow.
Yeah, this has been a boon for us. Through the pandemic, we were not able to sell our beers. All the restaurants were closed, and we had a lot of beer sitting with us. And I think the efforts of the association paid off, and we were allowed to open these growler stations. So they did very well through the pandemic, and even now it's an outlet for us to kind of increase our business and get some branding going. So it's a win-win, I think, for the consumers.
It's accelerated consumer, preferences. It's accelerated reaching out to a larger consumer base for sure. I think people were sitting at home and drinking beer during the pandemic. It seemed like it.
Yeah, I was one of them.
Yeah.
So now getting into craft beers, I want to get both of your views on how do you define craft beer? Because I don't want to go by this very formal definition that goes by the quantity you brew or stuff like that. So what is craft beer according to both of you?
So yeah, according to me, at first I did not even know I was drinking craft beer. There were different beers, and I said, wow, these are, pretty damn tasty compared to the commercial brews we've been drinking all this while. And once I started exploring, I realized that craft beer is a passion. It's more about the taste and the flavors you create, using natural and real ingredients which are available locally. And it also is an expression of the art of the brewer. Now, this is a big definition, and, many things can fit in and many things can be excluded. But by and large, something which is made with flavor being the paramount consideration, using local ingredients and the passion of the brewer, is what craft beer is according to me. Also, if you look at the history of craft beer, or generally the history of beer, you have these amazing brews all across Europe. And people, when they migrated to the US, they took some of their skills with them. But industrialization and, the growth kind of took away all these breweries, the prohibition in the US as well. And we were left with, one single brew, in different brands. And this is a resurgence of the traditional brews, which essentially is called craft. So flavor, ingredients, local, art, passion. I think that defines craft for me.
So craft, I agree with Naveen. Passion is very, very important when you talk about craft. Within the beer context and specifically within the Indian context, I think craft has come to be anything that is not mainstream or not large or not big. So, for example, Kingfisher would not be considered craft. Budweiser would not be considered craft. It is these, guys who say, hey, I had this amazing beer when I was traveling. I loved it. I found a connect. I want to come back and share that with a larger crew. And that's how they start brewing. That's how they start making cheese. That's how they start making coffee. For anything craft, I think within the Indian context, it is that. It is trying to do something new within an existing platform. Beer, of course, Kingfisher has ruled the roost. We all grew up drinking Kingfisher, London Pilsner, etc. But craft is now, I don't want to have a lager. Can I have an IPA? Can I have a stout? Can I have another style? So it allows an exploration of that particular category in greater depth.
So for me, craft, I actually like what you said, Naveen. It's about the passion and how true you want to perhaps be to your product. And to me, I struggle sometimes because with this whole concept, because just because a brewery is small and it might call itself craft, products could be really terrible though.
Absolutely.
And we've seen that a lot with Indian beers. Dare I bring up Gurgaon microbreweries? but we all have seen what has happened there, right? So just because you're a microbrewery may not really make you a craft beer. And to me, a brand like Erdinga that Pankil and I visited a few years back, they do things at scale as much as you possibly can, but everything, all processes from back in the day are followed. And to me, again, that is craft.
Absolutely, completely agree with you. I think it's a resurgence of the traditional brews that were done away with, right, in the interest of globalization and growth.
Yeah.
Now, you go to Belgium, you have hundreds of styles of beers. You go to Europe, right, you go to, say, Germany, which is, again, the land of lagers. Now, you go there, and if you have a lager that is made by a traditional brewery, you will love the craft behind it. You'll appreciate the flavors that come through. Whereas if you come to India or if you go to the US as well, now Budweiser and the lawnmower beers, so-called lawnmower beers, they've been kind of diluted down, so they look yellow, they taste like soda water, and they don't offend anybody, but they don't even please anybody. The goal being the cheapest drink to get a little buzz and get going. So yes, craft beer, completely agree with what you guys say. And I think I'm glad that I'm into this profession.
Yeah, I'm glad both of you are.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into a little bit of basics of beer. So without really getting into too much of detail, and I know how much we all can geek out on this, just help our audience understand the basics of beer. Perhaps if we just break it down to lagers and ales.
Okay, so how is beer made? A lot of people don't know how beer is made. So beer is made with barley malt, and you can have wheat malt as well. You basically crush the malt, you soak it in warm water, you kind of let it stew for a bit and extract the sweet liquid. And once that is extracted, you boil it with hops, you ferment it, and you have beer. So it's a very straightforward, very simple process. There are two types, ales and lagers. Ales are beers that are fermented at a slightly higher temperature. In the good old days, every beer was an ale. So an ale is fruitier in nature, and a lager is fermented at a colder temperature. So in Germany, they used to, brew the beer and store it cold. So over time, it used to lager. Lager is a German word to store cold. Because of that, it is less fruity and maltier and crisper in taste. So simply, ales are fruitier and more flavorful. Lagers are simple, straightforward, crisp and clean and refreshing.
You mentioned hops. What are hops?
Hops are these cone-like flowers that grow, in a wine-like fashion. And they have something called the alpha acid, and they also have essential oils. Now, when you put them during the boiling process, it extracts the bitterness out of the hop, and that balances the sweetness that you've extracted from the barley malt, and also lends a particular flavor and aroma to the beer through the essential oils.
So, should we talk about a few more jargons? Because hops is something that now we started seeing a lot more on labels, especially with craft, right? You will end up saying hops quite a bit. Sometimes you'll even end up mentioning the name of the hops.
Yeah.
So some of the common hops would be like a Cascade. What else?
So Cascade was a hop that was made popular by Sierra Nevada in the US, and it has a lot of citrus notes. And after that, because Americans tend to amplify everything they get into, there were a lot of hops that were grown, and there was a lot of breeding that was consciously done to extract more oils and aroma and flavor compounds. So when you hear about a Galaxy, or when you hear about, say, a Mosaic hop, these are hops specifically grown to lend a particular flavor profile to your brew, and the oils are also amplified in these particular hops. If you go back, say, 200 years, you had these noble hops which were very subtle. In Germany, you had Hallertau, you had Magnum, you had Saaz, which is out of Pilsen. And these hops used to just balance the sweetness and give you a hint of, herbal and spicy notes. Even in England, you'll find East Kent Goldings and Not Down, which are very, very subtle. So over the years, hops have been amplified because it lends a huge character to the beer, apart from the malt being used. And people have started to like this sort of a juicy character that is extracted from the hops.
Yeah, this whole juicy word is also thrown around quite a bit. I think we'll touch more about that in the IPA section of the episode. What about ABV?
ABV is alcohol by volume. And, I probably don't want to pay any heed to it, but across the world, or at least in India, you have strong beers and mild beers. and anything below 5% is considered mild, and everything above 5 is considered strong. Even in, say if you go to England, most of the beers are sub 4%. So alcohol by volume 4% and below is like a benign beverage. You can have a few and not get pissed drunk. And anything which is above, say, 6%, you could completely get toasted in a few drinks. But again, alcohol by volume plays a critical role. It defines the sweetness of the beer as well. So higher the alcohol in the beer, it becomes sweeter, and then you need more hops to balance it. And obviously, it's a much flavorful and a richer beer because of the higher alcohol.
Should we open up a beer?
Yes, I think that's a great idea. And I see these beautiful beers in front of me. So I think we definitely should.
I think keeping in line with the jargon and the beer terminology, we have a couple of beers here that I would actually want to read the label.
Mm-hmm.
So one is a Granita Weiss, but this is a sour ale with blood orange, guava and pineapple. So what is a sour ale?
Sour ale, this is a Berliner Weiss, if I'm not mistaken, and this is the type of beer that is fermented with yeast but also has bacteria in it, just as, you have yogurt, which is sour, and you have, say,
It's my favorite style of beer. Favorite style in general.
So it's a sour beer, made sour because of lactic acid bacteria, so it's very refreshing. I think it's a great drink for summer. And the moment you throw words like guava and pineapple and,
I like
granita.
I like the sound of granita. I think it's an attractive word to... Or I hope it tastes that refreshing.
And then we have a double IPA. So double is another term, right?
Yes.
What does double imply?
So double is, very simply, it's double the alcohol. You could put it this way. So IPAs are generally slightly stronger. So I would say IPAs tend to be at about 6.5%. If somebody calls it double, it's not necessarily 12%, but probably about 8 or 9%.
Yeah, this is 8.2.
There you go.
And not to confuse this with the Belgian double.
Mm-hmm.
That's DUBBELL.
Yes.
This is DOUBLE. So that double is a Belgian style.
Yeah.
Then we also have Guinness with us. And I think Guinness brings to me always the fun about Guinness is that a lot of people think that a stout or a Guinness is a very strong beer.
Yeah, I think there's this common misconception that, beers that are darker are stronger. And, Guinness being one of the more popular darker beers, people think it's stronger. But I think there's no correlation between, the color of the beer and ABV as we were talking about. It's just a function of the malt, right? I mean, I think it's the color is basically what you get when the malt is brewed into the beer finally. And you can change that again with different malt profiles as well.
Absolutely. But I think people do tend to refer to it as a stronger beer, perhaps because of the taste being stronger, as opposed to a light lager, as opposed to a light wheat beer.
It's a 4.1.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, I find stouts, or especially Guinness, maybe because it's the nitrogen, extremely light, like on the palate.
Same.
It's like almost watery to an extent, and it's so nice going down. It's so nice.
Yeah, a bunch of nerds.
Yeah,
What do you expect?
yeah. No, but Guinness especially, I think Guinness is, when you think of, imported beer, Guinness is the one that has the most recall value. I think people have heard about it, and all over the world, not only in India.
And finally, it's in India.
Yeah.
Is it?
Not in Maharashtra.
200 rupees in Gurgaon, which is
Not
nice.
in Maharashtra.
It's been brewed locally, or it's imported?
No.
Oh, it's imported.
Imported, yeah.
But 200 rupees in Gurgaon, in Maharashtra,
It's not bad.
yeah, it's not bad at all.
It'll be 1,000 rupees at Woodside.
It was, because
I
if we were
remember.
getting it was at like 800 rupees or something for, in Maharashtra.
Well, if you want it served chilled in the right manner, in the right atmosphere, then you got to pay 1,000 rupees for it.
Speaking of serving, right?
Yeah.
And I have to talk
Sorry,
about...
can we drink the beers?
Okay, wait.
What are you pouring? So this is done. Are you pouring anything else?
We'll open this,
The
right?
Granita Weiss.
Granita. So I'm going to pick up from the pouring, because you said about pouring.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Guys, pour. No, speaking of pouring beer properly, Pankil and I had gone to Belgium for Belgian Beer Weekend, and at one of the breweries, they're like, let us teach you how to pour beer. And
Clean a glass, wash a glass.
and we're thinking, you know what? Come on, man! We know how to pour beers. We've done that enough. You hold the glass at 45 degrees and slow pour it and stuff. And then they took us behind the counter, and this is how the Belgians do it. Every glass before serving is rinsed and washed again. Then they will aggressively pour the beer. The foam rises, and they'll take a knife and cut it. And I think that's the first time we consciously...
And they have this thing called sacrifice. So first you let a little beer out, sacrifice some beer, and then you pour into the glass, and then again let it pour out a little, and then cut it.
Yeah, and basically you're not slow pouring. That's another misconception that I think we've all grown up, that beer should be slowly poured and you shouldn't have too much foam on top. Like, aggressively pour beer, get a little bit of head on top. And I think you must have gotten this question a lot of times at Woodside.
I think when we pour beers, we, as a standard, we tend to keep 2 fingers of head, because in a glass, because that's what the beer needs. The beer needs the head for the flavors to come through. But a lot of times guests feel that we are not pouring the full glass, so they will come back and say, hey, listen, can you just remove the head and pour the entire beer till the top of the rim? And we have to educate them, and we have to explain to them at those times that a lot of the flavor, a lot of the texture of the beer will come from the head itself, and the head is an extremely important part of the beer.
Yeah, I agree completely. The pour is very, very important. It's not how you do it, it's what you end up in the glass. You need to have a creamy head. It should not have large bubbles. The glass should be clean. And it does a couple of things. One, we drink and eat visually. The dish may be fantastic, but it looks ugly, you're not going to drink it or eat it. So the head adds to the visual appeal. When the glass is clean, you will get a beautiful head. So it tells you that the glass is clean. It also knocks off some carbonation, which makes the beer smoother and less bitter. So there's a carbonic bite that is there in the beer. But if you pour it a little aggressively and let the carbonation break out, it brings out the flavors as well as it makes it really smooth. Also, if the beer is really cold, you will not be able to get the proper head. So I think those are all the reasons.
You said carbonic bite.
Right.
What's a carbonic bite?
Well, it's CO2, right? And CO2 is acidic in nature. So when you drink it, it tickles your tongue and you feel there's a little bitterness, and that's the carbonic bite which you get. So if you have a beer that's been aggressively poured, you'll have a smoother, creamier feel. If it's not poured very aggressively, or it's not poured with the right kind of head, you will find it to be more prickly and more tingling to your tongue and a little bit more bitter.
So tell me, both of you, tell me about some of your favorite beer styles, and also styles that I'm assuming now are available in the country for people to try.
So I love a traditionally poured cask ale, out of the UK. And unfortunately, we don't have them over here. And unfortunately, even in the UK, people are moving towards the commercial brews, and obviously microbrews are good. But the traditionally poured cask ales are something else. It's a swan neck, and you kind of hand pull it.
With a hand pull,
So you talk about aggression, you talk about knocking off the CO2. It gives you a very smooth beer, and I think that's what Guinness does. Through the can, it's low carbonation. There's a nitrogen widget. When you pop it open, it kind of diffuses the nitrogen into the beer and makes it extremely creamy. So my favorite style would be anything from UK, which is hand pulled with a small amount of bite but a creamy head.
What else though? Give me a few more.
So I'll share my style, which is, slightly new. It's not available in India. It's the Gueuze,
Belgian Gueuze.
Belgian Gueuze is my favorite, and it's under the sour umbrella of things. Spontaneously fermented, has that real funky aroma, funky taste, like the beer we're having, similar-ish to the beer we're having, and that does magic to my palate. It's so interesting as a flavor, just keeps on lingering, and it's maybe putting off to some people when it comes to the aroma.
So I have a lot to say about Gueuze, I think, for me as well.
Yeah.
But that's a Belgian style of spontaneously fermented beer. An example would be a Cantillon, which is really well known.
The rank.
But at home, there's an example. If you get apple cider vinegar with the mother, right, and you have a little shot, you will get those funky flavors and you'll get those notes in the apple cider vinegar. So for people who haven't tasted it, or people who haven't had a chance to try it, just drink a little bit of apple cider vinegar with mother, and you'll get an idea of what we're talking about.
I think and here's the thing. I think sours will do well in India, because more than bitterness that IPAs give, I think the sour palate we're used to, because we use
Nimboo
so
pani.
much souring in our food. Tamarind, kokum, these are all souring flavors that are commonplace in Indian cuisine.
So we have today in the studio we have one of the gateway beers that
Yes.
is a sour style,
Yep.
Goza. Tell me about a Goza.
So Goza is a sour beer, and it originated in the town of Goslar in Germany. And pre-World War II, there were Goza taverns in the city of Leipzig. They're extremely refreshing. There are very few beers in Germany that can, come and be available legally, because they have a Reinheitsgebot, which is the purity law, which does not allow for anything apart from, yeast, malt, and hops in a beer. Whereas a sour beer will have lactic acid bacteria that kind of lends the sourness and the refreshing character to the beer. So this beer has a little bit of saltiness in it. It's sour, and we've infused it with cucumber. So it's a fantastic summer, refreshing brew. So if you want to pour a glass,
We should definitely pour a glass after we finish this sour. Tell me the German law again.
This is the Reinheitsgebot. It was enacted in 1516, and any law pertaining to beer or alcohol is basically about revenues and control. So, but it's called the purity law also. And in those days, they didn't know that yeast used to make the beer. So the law said you could use malt, you could use hops, and you could use water to make beer, nothing else. So that's the law. And a lot of breweries I think most breweries in Germany would follow the law even today.
I think Germany kept going on that, and Belgian beers just went on a different tangent.
Yeah, anything goes in Belgium.
Anything goes.
Belgians are like, screw you, Germany.
But
still the best beer country in the world.
But coming back home, right? Coming back to India, so a Gueuze may not be available, right? Although Gateway did a very small batch of. So these kind of beers are also called lambic, and Gateway back in the day, because they're out of Dombivli, did a Dombic,
which is pretty good.
It was sour. It was sour as fuck, and it was really, really good. But for someone listening to this podcast, at least in Bangalore, Bombay, and hopefully Delhi will have breweries soon as well. What are the different styles that they can perhaps go and try apart from your wheat beers? Because I think wheat beers are the gateway into craft.
Absolutely.
And I think Hogarden's done a great job to educate people about wheat beers. But what could be other styles that might be easy to get into?
So I think right now what we are seeing, at least at Woodside Inn, is that Nepa's, New England IPAs, which is a subset of the IPA style, is acting as a good bridge for people who want to move from a Hefeweizen or a wit of some form into a more bitter, higher bittering style, which is a IPA. Because of the fruity aromas, because of the low bittering in a Nepa, it's giving a lot more relatability when it comes to fruitiness, which people like. Other styles, I think a malty lager. I was going to say stout is something that people say, especially in the north when it's cooler, or maybe in the Bombay winters, they might.
Can you say Bombay winters?
Bombay summer, sorry. The 2 days of Bombay winter make no sense. But yeah, I think stouts are something that, especially with Guinness being such a well-known brand, people are more open to exploring maybe that style. As I said, if you don't get Gueuze or have access to Gueuze, and we don't in India, sours. Goza is something that a lot of breweries are doing, including Gateway. And they're doing it because we see that people are again taking a liking to some form of Goza. So there are breweries that do a Karvanda Goza or a Cucumber Goza, which is great for the summer. So I think if you don't have access to it, there are versions of it that you can try and at least get a sense of what that beer style is like.
Let me quiz you on a couple of things and also see how involved you are with Woodside.
Okay.
How many taps at Colaba? Woodside
8.
Colaba. And what's the split of the beers there?
So we have 4 different breweries mainly that we work with in Colaba. So we have Gateway Brewing Company, which has half the taps. Then we also have Two Down Beer Company. We have Great State Ale Works that work in Colaba, and we have Bombay Brewing Company. In Bandra now, upstairs we will be having 16 taps pouring, I think, a total of 7 different breweries.
So in that, for example, in that 16 taps, what's the breakup of the beers?
The styles?
Styles, yeah.
Styles, So we'll have about four wheat beers, which would be a mix of wits or Hefeweizens. We'll have a couple of lagers. We'll have maybe a blonde or two. IPAs. So we'll have two Nepas, two IPAs, and one stout.
Okay. I think since we've been discussing IPAs and NEPAs for the last few minutes, we'll take a short break and do a deep dive on them.
Previously on Varta Lab. After 3 wonderful seasons, Akash and Navin went their separate ways in search for glory, comedy, and comedy glory. But all they found is long transit time, bureaucracy, and upset stomachs. Now, after 3 years of collecting stories and hustling,
I can't mention. Bullies. There's no need to overact. Bullies.
Akash and Navin are back at the lab
Let's do it.
with
Stories, we've got stories. They're a little bit of funny and a little bit of December. You wanna hear them? It's got humans. They're sitting in a box and talking bold at Varta.
Welcome back to A Niche Thing, and we are with Naveen and Pankil discussing craft beers. And now we're going to really get into IPAs.
Yes.
We're also drinking a lot of craft beer.
And we are drinking an IPA
IPA
right
as well.
now, which to us, on the nose, at least for me, is Mehendi. This is just Mehendi out and out.
Lot of vegetal and fruity characters mixed together.
I like
Mehendi.
this one. I think this is a really nice example of a simple, no fuss IPA. You're getting clear hops on the nose, not too much fruitiness. It's nice and easy to consume, even though it's 8%. I can drink this. This is a easy sessionable beer at 8%.
8% sessionable
It's not
beer sounds
sessionable.
disastrous.
No,
yeah,
no.
but it feels like it.
But getting back to IPAs,
Yes.
so not geeking out way too much on this, but there's a style of beer called India Pale Ale, and to be very clear, not Indian Pale Ale, India Pale Ale. And long story short, back in the day of British Raj,
1820s
1820s, beers were sent to India from the UK.
to Kolkata.
And at some point, they figured out that the beer's going bad because that much time on the ship, heat, this, that. And hops is what preserves beer, apart from giving it the signature beer bitterness. So the brewer or brewers, whoever did it first, decided to add more hops to the beer
Correct.
to preserve the beer. And that extra hoppy style came to be known as India Pale Ale because those beers were going to India. Cut to now, IPAs are just the rage. Like you cannot be a craft beer drinker and say you don't like IPAs.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be, I think you'll be IPA shamed if you said that. But what I really appreciate now is that apart from the small niche audience of craft beer drinkers who've been into IPA,
Mm-hmm.
today I see this at a Soho house. People who drink a lot of Nepa from Great State. The fact that a Gateway Brewing Company launched with a IPA,
Yes.
right? Today, Bira's launched a proper India Pale Ale in
Yes,
cans,
Mm-hmm.
available all over the country. And I think IPAs can be a very good gateway into craft beers, especially Nepas. So IPA is your traditional style India Pale Ale. Will you tell me a little bit more about Nepas?
So Nepas came about, I think, 4 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, and there were a lot of naysayers, for this particular style of brew. So when you talk about Nepa, it's essentially New England IPA, an IPA made in the eastern part of the United States. And the first versions of Nepa or the new releases that came about were extremely cloudy. They had low carbonation and they were very juice-like. So somebody, a lot of people sat up and said, this is flat and this is like a juice, and this is no beer. And even for that matter, when I tried Nepas, I was, taken aback and I said, this is not a beer I want to drink or even make a beer like this. But, years went by, and as people experimented with these beers, they realized that there is a space for this particular kind of brew. It may not be an everyday brew. You may kind of juggle between 2 or 3 different types of beers you like, but people started embracing them. It is an absolute delight. When you have these beers, the aroma hits you, the flavor hits you, ABV obviously hits you.
Oh, yeah.
And it is something which is drinkable, it's approachable, yet extremely, out there.
So Nepas in Bombay, I think, are a great style. I think it was almost a mistake that has worked out, and everybody's realizing that.
Who
it's
made the
worked.
mistake?
Yeah.
What do you mean mistake?
I think whoever made the first batch of Nepa, and I think a lot of credit needs to be given to Great State in that regard to, they popularized the Nepa. We've realized that it's the great bridge, as I mentioned before, because it's not as bitter as an IPA. IPAs tend to be, high bittering because of the high number of hops. It's fruity. As a palate, people in Bombay love fruitier styles of beer, especially craft beer. So it's fruity. It's not that bitter. You get beautiful aroma hops on the nose, and it's still easy to drink on a summer day. So it's, in a way, a great beer. It's the next iteration to having your Hefeweizens and Wits, and just one step away from having a proper IPA, which we're drinking. The double IPA we're drinking is a beautiful example of an IPA.
So for me, in IPA, notes like, and these notes come from hops, notes like tropical fruits, mangoes, guavas, bananas. I think to us who've consumed so much craft beers, it comes very naturally.
Yep.
But what perhaps Nepa does is takes all the good, juicy, fruity flavors, minimizes on the bitterness, and it's too easy to drink.
I think it's your mimosa meets the beer world kind of a situation, right? It is extremely juicy. It's a fruit. You don't tell somebody it's a beer, it's a fruit juice.
Yeah.
And they'll happily drink it and say, wow, I want
And
more.
I've not met a single person who's had a Nepa and not liked it.
Even beer geeks, like for example, if I want to session on something, if I want to continue drinking something through the night or through the evening, I will choose a Nepa because it gives me the balance of, hey, it's not overwhelming my palate. If I drink 2 or 3 of these, I'll need a palate cleanser to just, maybe do a lager just to clean
beer
a palate.
snobs, palate cleanser. I need a lager in
because
between my Nepas.
these are heavy beers on the palate. These are like your palate is just tasting bitter. It needs to be clean, otherwise it'll just go numb.
So I see a lot of more Nepas come up. I love Gateway's Nepa, Tutti Frutti.
Yes, Tutti
Tutti
Frutti.
Frutti would
Aptly
be,
named.
really aptly named. So this is all in Bombay. I don't know how much Nepa is happening in Bangalore, but in Bombay, I think most of the breweries now have a Nepa.
Yeah.
There's Tutti Frutti by Gateway. I think
Independence has their own Nepa.
They have a Nepa. Thirst Trap is by Bombay Dark.
But I think Thirst Trap is an IPA, not a Nepa.
I think it's borderline Nepa.
Okay. No, I mean, see, to me, it's just great that, hey, when I walk into a pub or a restaurant, I have an option. I'm coming from that point of view where, otherwise we are so heavy on our Hefeweizens or Wits, which are great as a entryway into the world of craft beer, especially when you're moving in from, say, a Kingfisher. But exploring the vast world that there is when it comes to flavors of beers, I can walk in and have at Woodside Inn a choice of IPAs which was unheard of. I never thought, because it's a difficult style to get into. It takes some time. It takes a few tries to get into it, and once you're into it, it's phenomenal. But it's still challenging, right? It's not for the first time. If you give them a IPA, they're not going to like it. They're never going to like it.
It's like a liver pate.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
it is. It's an acquired taste, right?
Absolutely.
But
It is.
but I really think in time, if there are enough Nepas can actually take over from a wheat beer as your gateway into craft, because I think it's a lot more flavorful.
I'm not sure whether people are looking for a whole lot of flavor. There's a charm to subtlety. So wheat beer is very light, very approachable. If you had a wheat beer, say 4 or 5 glasses, it wouldn't take away your palate. Then you have obviously the extreme version, of an IPA or of the wheat beer spectrum, which is heavily loaded with hops. So I think it's a choice, and it's a balance that somebody would choose anywhere in between. But taking over, I have my doubts.
Listen, I
hope so.
just love that we're at a point where I can start with a Hefeweizen, move to a Nepa, then have a stout,
That's
have
a
then go to
and
IPA,
a tequila in between.
then have something else. No, this is luxury what we're talking about.
Pankil,
you
that's
know,
a
this is-
regular day in your life.
yes,
We are mere
but-
mortals. We do not do that.
It's great that I have the option to. We all have an option
we
to.
do.
Or I could be sitting at home on my ass and having the option of choosing a Nepa from my favorite brewery or a new IPA from somebody else. That is luxury.
But I think talking about IPAs is great, but lagers also are,
Yeah.
out
Oh,
there.
yeah.
A good
lot of
lager
varieties.
A
is
good lager,
phenomenal.
but a good lager. Yeah.
Various kinds. The malt does wonders to a particular beer. So you can have pale lagers and you can go up to black. So, the whole spectrum is there.
You can do a black IPA. You
Yes.
can do a sour
Well, that's
IPA.
an
We did a
obvious-
hoppy lager.
How can you do a black IPA? It can't be pale and black at the same time.
We did a
Hey, you did a black IPA.
We did a black
No,
IPA.
but
we did a
hoppy
white
lagers,
IPA.
another variation which works really well. We did the Woodside and Bandra
Yeah.
launch with a hoppy lager
Yeah.
with Bombay Brewing Company, and it was
Amen.
Amen
Was good.
and it was so good.
Yeah.
It was so good and it was well received because again the sessionability of a lager, but the aroma hops that give you that fruitiness.
I think
that worked.
Pankil is a hophead. There's no denying that.
I don't think Pankil's a hophead.
I mean,
Pankil's a wannabe hophead.
I'm a goose head, then I'm a hop head because if I'm not getting my craving satisfied with.
So let me pull this conversation back a bit. I think if you are in Maharashtra, you have so much beer choice, it's not even funny.
Correct.
Whether you're in Bombay, Pune, you can literally go to a pub and carry beer home or order it on a... Today you can order beer on a Zomato or one of the apps and it'll come home. If you're in if you're in Bangalore, you again have enough choices, not to get the beers at home, but you can go to any of the breweries to drink and you have so much option there. Delhi is getting there. Gurgaon, just go to your Thekas. We have a Lagunitas IPA right now in the studio, which I got from Gurgaon, which is crazy. So Gurgaon actually has a surprise in terms of bottled beer availability.
White
And
Rhino is also in
White
Delhi
Rhino
and
is in Delhi.
Delhi and Gurgaon. right?
Fantastic IPA.
Yeah.
Fantastic
Bottled beer.
Hellas also is
yeah.
fantastic lager. Well, the good thing in Bangalore is you have so much money saved over because of low rent. that
Come
you
on,
could drink
let's not.
and the excise. Anyway.
That could be a separate episode
yeah,
on a
we
niche
need
thing.
a separate
Yeah.
episode on
No, then you can switch
regulation.
over to whiskey,
Yeah.
if you don't have a choice.
So,
in
so
beer.
if you're in Maharashtra and Bangalore, you're really, really sorted. Delhi and Gurgaon has enough choices in bottled beers, at least, like right from a Guinness to a Lagunitas is spectacular. And then I do think your brands like Biras and some of the other bigger brands, right? I think they're
Budweiser has a wheat beer as well.
Kingfisher has a wit.
Yeah,
Let's
Kingfisher has
not
a wheat.
talk about that.
Okay.
The Kingfisher wit, I'm not a very big fan of.
Budweiser wheat.
Ultra, I'm still okay with.
Budweiser has a wheat beer.
I didn't try that yet.
I
I've
haven't
not
tried
tried
it. Seven
Budweiser.
Rivers, I
I
think.
mean,
There's
Hogarden
Simba-
is brewed in
There's
Bombay
Simba.
now.
Simba's doing a
Simba
good job again of just getting
The
more beers
weight.
out there.
Hogarden, look, brewed in India.
Yeah. Not only Hogarden and Corona are both bottled in India now.
Mm-hmm.
That's how the MRPs have gone down, which is really, really good. And in Goa, you have so much beer in Goa as well.
I mean, Goa Brewing Company is really doing good stuff.
Goa Brewing, Arbor's done a great
Arbor's done a
job.
great job.
There's another brand out of Goa.
There's Makadi now out of
Susegado.
Goa, Susegado, yeah. So even Goa, you have enough craft beer options today that are brewed locally.
Absolutely.
Guys, thank you so much for being in the studio with me. Any last advice, tip, or anything to someone who wants to get into craft?
Don't get into the business of it.
Oh, into the manufacturing business?
Yeah, don't,
oh hell
don't,
no!
Don't
I'm
get
not.
into the business
Yeah.
of it, but
No,
drink.
I think
Yes,
I think
absolutely.
people who have who love beer, I think it's just about opening your heart to exploring new styles. There are so many innumerable that even if you combine all the beer that the three of us together have had, we're still not scratched the surface of beer. And I think it's just about opening up and being open to trying new styles. Give it a chance. I guarantee that craft beer will not disappoint.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you guys for being in the studio, and thank you for listening to this episode of A Niche Thing. I really hope you've learned a little bit more about craft beers. There's actually a lot of work that goes into it at every stage, and there are so many new brands, and please go try some new brands out.
Pleasure.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you so much.